We put our rankings up earlier than ever this year, and then we changed them. And then we changed them again. And this time of year, you're likely to find changes every day, probably multiple times a day. There's even one specific running back that I badmouthed on this very podcast just a couple weeks ago that I've done almost a 180 on. Almost. Find out which player that is that has me changing my mind, plus lots of other ranking moves that are bound to impact your draft. An all-new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Schaff and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here to talk fantasy football rankings, and we are more than 2 weeks into training camp now. We've got the first full week of preseason games behind us. That means more details on expected roles. It means more buzz out of practices on who looks good and who doesn't. It means injuries. And Jared, one of the questions that we get every summer around this time: are the rankings going to be up to date when I open my draft war room on draft day? The answer is yes. It's a simple yes, right?
Yeah. At this time of the offseason, we're updating them every single day. There's not a day that goes by that we don't get something, whether it's out of camp, injuries, preseason, that has us updating these rankings. Those updates are immediately reflected both on the default rankings page on Draft Sharks and your draft war room.
Constant updates, like Jared said. Oftentimes, he tells the group what he's changing. Sometimes he goes a little maverick and adjusts players and then just waits for me to flame him on the changes. But you also do a weekly roundup on these rankings movers so that people can track exactly what has changed.
Yeah, the Risers and Fallers article on Draft Sharks is going to show you literally every player that moves in the rankings, along with a brief explanation of why we made the change.
And today we're going to be talking through some of those key recent movers, the what, the why, the how you should be treating these affected players in your drafts, if you should change your treatment of them at all. Let's jump right in, Jared. We're going to start at wide receiver, and let's talk Bucs wideouts, because we've got Emeka, Egbuka, Chris Godwin. We've talked about both of them for related but also different reasons to this point. The biggest new piece factoring in now is Bucs GM Jason Licht said last week he doesn't know whether Chris Godwin is going to need to open the season on the PUP list. Now, that doesn't mean Godwin's going to, but if they're uncertain right now, it's at least a possibility, and that matters because that would mean, if he is on the PUP list, it would mean Godwin misses at least the first 4 games of the season.
Yeah, and that's not a new revelation from the Bucs either. I got to give it to them. They've been pretty honest with the Godwin thing, not obviously giving us all the details, but multiple times this offseason they've been non-committal on his availability for the start of the season. That was even before he had that second surgery on the left ankle this spring. So at this point, Godwin's he's been moving down our rankings. I think there's a chance he misses, like you said, Matt, those first 4 games. We're less than a month away from the season now, and he's still not practicing. So I think, at minimum, he's going to be a risky early season starter, even if he does play week 1. And that in turn only helps Emeka Egbuka, who, the hype just continues rolling on this guy from his coaches, from Baker Mayfield and the rest of that wide receiver room, from the media. We saw Egbuka in the Bucs preseason opener make a nice 21-yard catch. Interesting usage note from that game as well. Egbuka played 9 of his 10 snaps outside. Now, if you want to be optimistic on Chris Godwin, you can kind of read that as the Bucs are getting ready for their wide receiver room to have Chris Godwin. Because I think when Godwin's healthy, he's going to play more slot than Egbuka. You're going to have Egbuka playing on the outside, which is not a bad thing. Egbuka was a primary slot in college, but he was more efficient in terms of yards per route on the outside. And we've already heard both Baker Mayfield and the Bucs coaching staff talk about how he's just super smart, high football IQ. He can play all 3 positions already in this offense. So I do think the Bucs are prepping for Godwin's return, and in that case, you're going to have Godwin in the slot, Egbuka outside. But regardless, all the Godwin uncertainty only helps Egbuka's early season outlook, and he's the type of talent, it seems to me, that if he gets off to a hot start, he's probably not going to slow down.
Yeah, we're going to have to keep watching Godwin to see when he does get back on the field. Obviously, it might come right up to the start of the season when we find out whether he's actually going to be on that physically unable to perform list or not. We'll be judging that all along the way. He remains a decent stash because he's going to be on your bench, but obviously you have to deal with that injury uncertainty. The further away from the season that you draft, let's hope that we have some clarity before the big draft weekends right ahead of the season. But I mean, we've said all along, even if Egbuka doesn't look like a strong value by our rankings versus ADP, I want to be in on the rookie because I think he's going to be involved even when Godwin's around. He's done nothing but impress. He draws nothing but praise from anybody who watches him and talks about him. Certainly seems like a player to bet on. We'll see exactly what it means touch-wise. Godwin, one of those players that I did have to adjust in updating my 10-team draft guide articles. You can find updated editions for all those formats on draftsharks.com. Now, we run through a full draft plan from every draft position for those different formats that are listed. Joe Mixon, Jared, another big one. We're not going to talk about on this show specifically, but a player that I had to adjust down, kind of, get upset every time I do it. But that's another one of those things that we're updating as we go, making changes to make sure that we're up to date. And speaking of, that injury uncertainty that with Godwin, obviously that's an even bigger factor for Joe Mixon. Not bigger, but as big a factor for Joe Mixon, another guy that we don't know how to read. We'll keep watching that one. We'll keep updating fantasy news as things happen there. We've got one other wide receiver situation to talk about here, and it's Green Bay, which over the entire time that Matt LaFleur has been there has been this spread it around wide receiver core. At times that bugs us for trying to figure out whether we can start Jayden Reed. At times it makes us wonder exactly who we can count on. What does all that mean for Matthew Golden right now? How has he moved in our rankings?
Yeah, he's moving up. He's a guy, I'm trying to decide how much I want to stick to my priors as a guy that, I thought he was a kind of a flimsy prospect, at least compared to where he went in the NFL draft. But for starters, he gets the round one draft capital. Then everything we've heard on Golden, both from Packers coaches and the media who's been in attendance at training camp, has been super positive. It's clear that Golden is set to play a big role right away. Everything we've heard out of training camp suggests that. You look at Green Bay's preseason opener, Golden ran her out on all 6 of Jordan Love's dropbacks in that game. And then on top of that, we have Jayden Reed, who showed up to that preseason game with a walking boot on his left foot. We don't have any details on that. Matt LaFleur did not say for sure that Reed's going to be ready for week 1. That's kind of the extent of the details we have on the situation. Don't really know anything about the injury or exactly how long Reed will be out, but that only helps Matthew Golden as well. Not that those guys play the same position. I don't think Reed being out is going to boost Golden's playing time, but it can definitely boost his target potential. Golden's still going late enough. Look at, wide receiver 42 in our consensus ADP. Then again, I still have questions about the player, but at some point you gotta kind of bow to the draft capital and everything we're hearing out of Green Bay. So he's someone I'm interested in now at that, wide receiver 4 price tag.
And I think it's important to differentiate between formats here. You can like Golden at cost for this year and still dislike his long-term outlook for dynasty. And that's how I would treat him right now. I think he's just fine in wide receiver 4 range for all the reasons that you just mentioned. I would still bet against him long-term because both the Green Bay situation has yet to show us it can, steadily deliver targets to a single receiver where we can depend on him week to week, and because of the issues with Golden as a prospect. They can like him all they want. And of course, he's a fast wideout. They picked in round 1. He's likely going to impress them on the practice field. That doesn't assuage any of the issues that bugged us about him as a prospect coming in, such as him never leading his college team in receptions. So I remain wary long-term, but as long as he's in wide receiver 4 range for drafts, I got no problem with taking shots on Matthew Golden for this coming season, especially the longer Jayden Reed remains out. Let's switch over to the backfield now. And Jared, that's where we find somebody that I've really had to make myself change my mind on. We talked on the NFC North preview recently about Jordan Mason's ADP being too high. I know I've softened my stance on that. I still don't like him as a fantasy asset right now, but there's lots of buzz about him getting plenty of work, even including Kevin O'Connell recently praising his receiving work. Now, I'm skeptical that Jordan Mason's going to take much receiving away from Aaron Jones, but it's pretty clear that they want Jordan Mason to be heavily involved. So how have those two changed in our rankings over the past week or so?
Yeah, O'Connell described the backfield for the second time this offseason as a 1A, 1B situation with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. As you said, Matt, O'Connell also talked up Mason's ability as a pass catcher and a pass protector. I'm not buying that part of it either. Jordan Mason has 14 catches through 3 NFL seasons. He has been efficient as a pass catcher on that very limited sample. He's 78% catch rate, 8.7 yards per catch. But I just think Aaron Jones, it just has such a longer and bigger track record of pass catching production. I still think Jones is going to lead this team pretty easily in pass catching work. But at this point, we're projecting a close to near even split on early downs, which again, it makes sense. Beyond the O'Connell stuff, Jordan Mason is 26 years old. Aaron Jones is 30 years old. They're probably heading, opposite directions in their careers in terms of, efficiency and just ability as a runner. And even last year, Jordan Mason, outside of the awesome situation he was in that San Francisco running game, he was really good in the advanced metrics we look at. 10th in yards after contact per attempt among 47 running backs, 3rd in rush yards over expected per attempt. He beat Aaron Jones in both of those metrics. So, I'm just buying it at this point. I don't know if we were just being stubborn early in the offseason, but I do think that you're going to see something close to a 50-50 split in terms of carries. I think Jordan Mason might be the favorite for goal line work. We've heard the Vikings coaching staff talk up his ability in short yardage this offseason. But again, I do still think you're going to get Aaron Jones controlling passing down work. So we still have Jones ranked higher, at least in full PPR, but they've gotten a lot closer than they were, a couple weeks ago.
I'm going to stop telling people that Jordan Mason's a bad pick at ADP, especially because Aaron Jones has also been a little bit fragile throughout his career. And if Aaron Jones goes down, I think the big takeaway on the receiving stuff is we should expect that Jordan Mason would clearly lead that backfield if Aaron Jones goes down. We would not expect them to find somebody else to take on third down type of duties. So you like that aspect. You have to factor in that handcuff upside. My real take on this backfield is I'm really not that interested for my lineup setting league, because if they truly do split work the way that they're talking about doing, the way that we're now expecting them to do, both of these guys are going to be really frustrating throughout fantasy season. You're going to start, if you have one, you're going to, lose touchdowns in a given week, and you're going to wonder the next week if you should go ahead and start that guy and then watch your guy score a touchdown on the bench. If you have both, you're going to be trying to decide which one to start in a given week, and we'll all have to watch and see how the work gets split between them. So for me, I'd rather have a clearer situation, and not just that, because we can find value in attacking situations that aren't clear heading into the season. But this is one of those unclear situations that I don't think the team wants to clear up fantasy-wise. Mm-hmm. Like, what we want from an unclear backfield is we want to take one guy and then wait for him to emerge. Minnesota has no reason to want one of these guys to take over the backfield. Their ideal should be splitting this throughout the season, keeping both of these guys fresh and having both of them produce for the offense all year.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not like Jacksonville's backfield where we think, one of these guys might emerge as a clear lead runner. Those guys are also cheaper, so it's kind of a different discussion. But I will say the thing with these Vikings backs is they're both priced as like RB3s at this point. If you look at consensus ADP, Aaron Jones is RB26, Jordan Mason is RB35. That's not too far off from where we have them ranked at this point. So I think, just standalone, they're going at okay values. And I do think like they'll be okay RB3 flex plays to start the season. But then, like you said, Matt, they both have this handcuff appeal where if the other one goes down, the other guy is going to become, a top 20 back, at least maybe a top 15 back. The other thing with this Vikings offense too, I think the running game is going to be good. And the more I think about the offense, I do wonder if they're going to shift toward the run versus, what we've seen from O'Connell offenses in the past. You just look at the fact they added Jordan Mason, they added a couple good O linemen, and they have, essentially a rookie quarterback who's going to be making, his first start when we get to week 1. So I do think you could see more of a run lean, which would help both these guys and probably even help Mason a bit more than Jones.
Yeah, I think we should expect at least a bit more. It should be the best backfield that they've had since Kevin O'Connell arrived. They had some iffy Dalvin Cook years to start things out. Then Aaron Jones last year, got career high work, but the trade for Jordan Mason says they don't want him to get career high work. So I would expect that they run it a little bit more at least this year, and we'll see just how much that shifts. We're also watching the Denver backfield, where the first unofficial depth chart made everybody chuckle because it had RJ Harvey 5th. Obviously, they're like, okay, whose son is going to do the depth chart this week? Have fun with it. Make sure you put RJ Harvey really low. The preseason opener revealed that it was a joke because Harvey started that game. He played nearly every single first and second down with the first team. J.K. Dobbins served as the third down back, which seems like an awkward fit for him. I know that they've talked up his pass protection, but he hasn't been a very good receiver through his career so far. So, we'll see exactly how that plays out. How have the projections changed for these guys and maybe anybody else in Denver?
Yeah, this was surprising usage in the preseason opener for a couple of reasons. First, that a lot of what we've been hearing out of Denver is that Dobbins was running ahead of Harvey. Maybe not a big split, maybe a 1A, 1B, but Dobbins has been getting more first team reps. So that was, a bit surprising. And to me, it's really notable when a rookie plays ahead of a veteran like this in the very first preseason game. Now, slight caveat to that, J.K. Dobbins didn't join the team until mid-June on that 1-year deal, but mid-June's like 2 months ago now. I think he's been there long enough where he should be comfortable with the offense, especially compared to a rookie who, has only been there a couple months longer. So really notable to me that, Harvey got this type of usage, and the deployment makes sense to me too, because Harvey's biggest weakness, you talk to film people or you look at the numbers in college, his biggest weakness was pass protection. So even though Dobbins is not maybe a great pass catcher, I think they trust him in pass pro. So it makes sense that he's going to play third downs. But if this type of usage sticks in the regular season and Harvey's playing, 2/3 of the snaps and, out carrying Dobbins, and Harvey's still going to be plenty involved in the passing game too, even if he's not playing on third downs. I'm still debating. We already bumped him up the rankings. He's up to like RB 25 now, I think. I'm still wondering if we need to bump him up higher. We might wait till get one more preseason game. If we get the same usage again, I think Harvey's going to be higher in our rankings.
That's my lean, is to wait until we get a little bit more data on this, because it is just one game and coaches are bound to treat these games differently. Some might come right out and say, okay, we're going to go with what we want our first team look to be. Another might be like, all right, I already know what we've got in J.K. Dobbins, so let's really run RJ Harvey heavy in this game, and we'll see what he's got and see if we need to adjust the plan from there or if he's ready to serve that role. Sean Payton even said afterward, I'm going to flip it up for the next one, and who knows what flip it up means. We'll see. I think he's going to be toying with us all year on how the backfield shakes out. There is still Audric Estime, who every once in a while gets some slight buzz. We'll see if he's involved. Jaleel McLaughlin is still there, but has, failed to impress. I think he's probably going to wind up fourth or, whatever that actually equates to once we get to the regular season. But I think we should wait and see exactly what happens in this backfield going forward. I think RJ Harvey's the best bet to lead it in fantasy production for the season. The part that we need to see is exactly how the work is expected to break down between him and Dobbins, and whether Estime is going to factor in anymore.
Yeah, the nice thing for Harvey and even Dobbins is that none of those other backs got any snaps with Bo Nix in this preseason opener. We've seen plenty of Sean Payton backfields, and even the Broncos at times last year used 3 running backs. That was not the case in the preseason opener. Just how they've talked about these guys, especially since Dobbins arrives, makes me think it's really going to be just a 2-man committee, which makes it possible for both these guys to have some starter level fantasy value.
And unlike that Minnesota backfield that we just talked about, here's one where I'm fine taking either guy. I'm fine taking RJ Harvey at that fringe RB2, RB3 range, because I think Denver would like for him to be the most productive back. I think that they would like him to lead the backfield in touches this year, and they're just kind of working through it now to see how much Harvey is ready for, what role Dobbins could play. And I'm also fine taking Dobbins where he's going in RB4 range, because he's going to have some kind of role, does have the handcuff upside, and does have the background where Denver would probably feel pretty comfy giving him the ball plenty if Harvey did go.
Yeah, still a backfield we want pieces of. We talked about how productive Sean Payton backfields have been for fantasy.
You can find fantasy football news updates, our Shark Bites, on draftsharks.com. That includes analysis right after that first Denver preseason game about the backfield split. We also hit on Miami's backfield usage in the Shark Bites section. Lots of other news, buzz, injury situations, etc. Of course, we dive deeper into the analysis, though, in our fantasy football news than really any other news updates that you're going to find on other sites. So make sure you check those out. Follow them throughout the preseason to get the updates you need. They're free, even if you're not a DS subscriber. Even if you decide not to give us any money at any point, we'll still give you free Shark Bites, and you can get our quick analysis on all these, news items and game situations. The Giants backfield is one that made some news in our Shark Bites this week. We started out projections time, just kind of splitting the Giants running backs, probably leaning, I don't remember for sure, but I think we leaned slightly toward Cam Skattebo when we first came out with the numbers, but basically even between him and Tyrone Tracy. Then what happened recently is ESPN's Jordan Raanan, who is a beat writer for the Giants, has covered them for a while, basically called Tyrone Tracy the clear lead back, even when Skattebo is healthy. Skattebo's dealing with an injury right now, so that certainly doesn't help. How have the projections adjusted based on that revelation, Jared?
Yeah, Raanan said, quote, no competition in the Giants backfield, and quote, it's 100% Tyrone Tracy. It was nice, get a beat writer coming out there and being that sure or something. And honestly, Raanan is like, he's up there. If I was doing beat writer power rankings, he'd be up there for me. Like he's someone I think we can and should trust on this stuff. Brian Dable also talked up Tyrone Tracy's growth from year 1 to year 2 the day before that run-on interview on Sirius XM. So there's been a couple positive bits on Tyrone Tracy over this past week now. Skattebo, by the way, has been out for over a week now with what's believed to be a hamstring injury. The team hasn't confirmed that, but Run-On says it's a hamstring injury. A couple other their beat writers believe it's a hamstring injury. So Tracy definitely moved up our rankings. Skattebo in the opposite direction. I do want to be careful with this one, though, because I think, Run-On's projecting how this backfield is going to look early in the season. And I do think Tracy's going to be the guy. Like, Tracy's probably going to land like maybe in low end RB2 range in our week 1 rankings. He's going to be someone you can start and feel okay about. But this thing can still evolve throughout the course of the season. Skattebo is a rookie. You would expect him to, be behind to start. The hamstring injury obviously isn't helping him, but I think there's still a chance that, and even Run-On, part of his interview too was talking about how, they did and probably still view Skattebo as a complementary piece. He was saying, he was talking about maybe on passing downs, maybe in short yardage. So that's still on the table. So again, this is more of like a short-term thing for me, where Tracy's definitely going to be the Giants running back to play in fantasy out of the gate. But I don't want to go overboard and say he's going to be this RB2 all season long. I think that's why you're still going to find him in RB3 range in our season long rankings.
A year ago, the Giants had just signed Devin Singletary to a multi-year deal in free agency. They drafted Tyrone Tracy in the 5th round. Singletary opened the season as the clear leader of the backfield. So it's a very similar scenario, with Singletary being a more established player at that point, with more background with Brian Daboll than Tyrone Tracy has coming into this year. So we can't ignore that scenario as we assess this one. Me personally, I think underrating Tracy's chances of at least opening the season as the clear backfield leader here, because what we didn't like about his 2024 was the efficiency, the metrics behind the production. We loved that he took over the job right away, especially as a guy who did not spend much time in college playing running back. So we love that he quickly took over the Giants' backfield despite starting out behind Devin Singletary. We love that he, wound up giving us good numbers overall fantasy-wise, but we need to pay attention to that efficiency behind the scenes in case, especially, it signals that the Giants feel like they can upgrade. Now, the other side of that is it's just 1 year for a guy that hasn't played much running back. So it's entirely possible that Tyrone Tracy plays this year and does much better in the efficiency metrics. Maybe he knows how to play running back better, especially in the pros, which is a lot different than playing it at Purdue. So maybe he's just ready to be a better running back. Maybe he can leverage that speed and the receiving skills and become a 3-down type of guy and lead Cam Skattebo, who has the disadvantage of entering the season with a hamstring injury, supposedly. So I agree. The one thing I want to make sure that I do is not be too certain about anything in this backfield. If we see Tyrone Tracy jump to like RB20 in ADP, I'm probably not interested. I'm probably going to take Cam Skattebo. As it is, though, Tyrone Tracy's still just RB32 on Underdog as of Monday morning. Cam Skattebo's RB36, so not that far apart. Looking at drafters, Tracy's even lower, RB33. Cam Skattebo, RB40. So drafters are not committing to anybody. They're just like, I don't want the Giants backfield. That's a situation where I think we can pounce. You can take either guy that makes it to you. You can take both of them at that point, especially for a best ball roster, and then see how things shake out.
Yeah, and as always, think about how these players fit within your team build. Right? I think like Tracy is a nice pick if you're maybe going 0 RB, or you draft some rookies early, or you draft an injured player like Joe Mixon. I think, Tracy fits best on those teams because, again, you're going to be able to count on him, I think, as at least a low-end fantasy starter early on, where, Skattebo is someone who is definitely a bench stash. You're not counting on early season production. So if you start with, 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds and you feel good about the position, that's when you can kind of, take Skattebo in round 9 or round 10 and just stash him on your bench and see what happens.
Yeah, I did add Tyrone Tracy to the latest update of the RB Sleepers article, so check that one out. But like I said, I'm interested in both of these guys at cost at this point. We'll see about the injury situation with Skattebo and how that changes things. And I don't even mind pairing these two together on a lineup setting roster and seeing what happens, because I can draft them both at the point where I don't need either one to start, depending on, what I have to open the season. And I think somebody's going to produce in this backfield. So it'll be interesting to watch. The Jets backfield is going to have somebody produce as well. And Jared, Breece Hall has been a tough projection to really nail down all throughout the offseason. Now we've got some buzz for Braylon Allen on top of that. So how has that affected the rankings for these Jets backs this summer?
And we got 10 plays of this first team offense in the Jets preseason opener. And as Aaron Glenn told us way back in March, he said he wanted to use 3 running backs, and that is what they did in the preseason opener. Justin Fields played 10 plays on 1 drive. Breece Hall was on the field for 5 of those 10 plays. Isaiah Davis for 3 of them. Braylon Allen for 2 of them. Hall got the start. He was rotating with Braylon Allen on early downs. Isaiah Davis played both of the third downs. Just 1 game, but again, Aaron Glenn said he wanted to do this way back in March, and we've heard buzz on Braylon Allen. There hasn't been much buzz on Isaiah Davis, but it looks at least possible that he's going to play third down. So getting tougher and tougher to be excited about Breece Hall's upside if this is going to be the situation. We moved him down the rankings a couple more spots after this game. To me, he's now more in the James Cook, James Conner, Chuba Hubbard tier than the Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving. So at this point for me, Breece Hall looks like a guy I'm not going to consider taking until round 4.
Yeah, I agree with that. We'll talk about Chuba Hubbard in a minute as well. It's especially worrisome, I think, if Breece Hall is ceding receiving work to Isaiah Davis, because that should be the area where he clearly leads the backfield. I would certainly assume that he does lead it, but if he doesn't dominate it, that's going to cut way into his upside from, a still fairly early ADP. We're talking about on the fringe of RB1 to RB2 range. So you need to have upside toward RB6 to really be a good pick in that range. And that's what we're worried about with this work share. So we'll see how it plays out over the next couple of preseason games. And if it continues this way, Breece Hall, I agree, is just going to kind of be a guy in that range as opposed to a player to target in there. If you disagree with us, if you're still Breece Hall is the best player there and you just draft him and then wait for the team to figure it out in season, that's fine. Let us know in the comments on YouTube, on Spotify, wherever else you're able to comment where you take in this podcast. You can also jump into the Draft Shark subreddit and challenge us on this ranking or any other player takes right there. You can find the link to join the subreddit in the show notes. I know I always enjoy player challenges. I know Jared tends to enjoy them as well. Maybe not arguing quite as much as I do, but we both like supporting these player takes because we certainly don't just toss them out willy-nilly. Last couple backfields here, Jared. We've got the Browns up next, and this one was supposed to be clear. We should have had Quinshon Judkins leading this backfield. Instead, we have absolutely no idea when or if he's going to see an NFL field. So what does that leave behind him in terms of how we're treating the Browns running backs?
I mean, Quinshon Judkins isn't even signed yet. He's not even officially a Brown yet. So, I mean, there's a long ways to go for him. Legal wise, the recent news was that he waived his right to a speedy trial. And I don't know what any of this means, but I follow Drew Davenport, who is a practicing attorney, works for Football Guys, knows his stuff on the legal side here. And
friend of the show, by the way.
Friend of the show. He speculates that this could mean a settlement is coming, which I guess would be good news just to have a resolution on the legal side to this. I still think that would probably mean a suspension for Judkins based on the NFL's personal conduct policy with the domestic violence stuff. 6 games is kind of tends to be the norm for that. But again, it's all speculation at this point. We just don't know, and that makes this a tough situation. I think the question to think about now is what does this backfield look like if Judkins is not available? And at this point, I would be surprised if he plays week 1. So you're going to have Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson as, the top 2 guys on this depth chart. I'm on the Jerome Ford side here. I know drafters are more excited about Dylan Sampson. I get it. He's a rookie. He's kind of like the shiny new toy, but Jerome Ford, for starters, was good last year. 5.4 yards per carry on a Browns team where all other Browns running backs averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Ford last year, 5th in rush yards over expected per attempt among 47 qualifying running backs, also 5th in yards after contact per attempt. Plus, he led the Browns with 37 catches last year after catching 44 balls in 2023. So he was an efficient runner last year. He's a good pass catcher. I think Dylan Sampson is a question mark as a pass catcher. And even just looking at Ford versus Sampson as college prospects, both guys broke out in their final college season. They didn't have long track records of production. Sampson is 200 pounds with a 54th percentile speed score. Jerome Ford is 210 pounds with an 85th percentile speed score. So he's the better, size speed athlete. Dylan Sampson did go 30 picks earlier in his draft than Ford did, but they're both day 3 guys. And to me, the last reason I favor Ford here is just timing. If Judkins is suspended, it's probably going to come at the start of the season. And if Ford's going to be ahead of Sampson at any point, it's most likely to be early on this season. If Sampson's going to make a move as a rookie, it's probably going to take a little while. So I just think if we're looking at week 1 rankings at this point, and if Judkins is out, I think Jerome Ford's going to be the better week 1 fantasy bet. If you told me that Judkins is going to be suspended the entire season or just not play this year, then I might, lean towards Sampson and his ability to, maybe be the lead back here later on. But early in the season, I think Ford's going to be the guy you want in fantasy lineups.
Yeah, this is a point I've made on here a few times. We tend to look at draft picks as necessarily damning of the guys who are already on the roster at their position. And, sometimes it's right and other times it's just too much assumption. I think in this case, we should not assume that Dylan Sampson is ahead of Jerome Ford in the hopes of Browns coaches. Maybe they're like, Dylan Sampson is an upgrade over Jerome Ford. Or maybe they're like, hey, we like Dylan Sampson, let's get him. We probably won't be signing Jerome Ford to another contract after this season because it just doesn't make sense for his level of running back. But we'll go ahead and run Jerome Ford as much as we want this year because we still like him as a player. And, for the reasons you just stated, he was good last year. He's been good for the past couple of years. He is a potentially dynamic mover with the ball, both as a runner and a receiver. So Jerome Ford's definitely going to be involved. And the fact that he has actually produced in NFL games should put him ahead of Dylan Sampson, I think. I think that they're both priced where if you have a favorite between them, fine, you can feel free to go with Sampson because they're both priced well into reserve range. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake that drafters are making. Somebody here is going to be the week 1 starter. It's probably not going to be Judkins. And even if he does make it back ahead of week 1, if there is a settlement, there's definitely going to be a suspension. I mean, there's no way that the league's like, oh yeah, that's fine. You settled that. We'll forget that it happened. Something's coming. So you should expect Jerome Ford, I think, to be the starter for, at least the first game or two of the season. That makes him a worthwhile pick, and especially somebody that you can stick on a roster where maybe you took a couple other chances at running back. You don't know exactly how things are going to shake out. You're like, here's an early season starter in an offense that's been running back friendly. I like Jerome Ford where I can.
Now, I definitely don't think Ford's going to be any type of league winner. I think both Ford and Sampson project as more committee backs, even long term in the NFL. And I think both guys will probably be involved right out of the gate. But again, I do think Ford is the best bet to be the lead back early in the season, and I think that's kind of what you're looking for if you're taking either of these guys in a lineup setting league.
And he could very easily be a full season's worth of what Tyrone Tracy was at the very least for the Giants last year, and maybe better than that because he has been a more efficient mover of the ball. And again, in an offense that I think is friendlier for running back scoring and touches than the Giants are.
Yeah, and both these guys still outside the top 50 running backs in consensus ADP. Dylan Sampson, RB 51, Jerome Ford, RB 53. So I think they're both undervalued at this point. I think people are probably still underrating the Judkins situation and thinking he's going to be on the field sooner than he is. I wouldn't mind taking both of these guys in a lineup setting league at those price tags.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are not as sure about Jerome Ford as I am, then feel free to take them both and see what happens because we're talking about 2 late RB4 to RB5 types on your roster. Close it out with the Panthers backfield, where there's a lot more certainty than in Cleveland, but some key uncertainty about roles here. Chuba Hubbard's obviously the lead guy. He signed an extension in November with the Panthers that's paying him a little bit more than $8 million per year on average over 4 seasons. Clearly, they're going to keep him leading the backfield for at least the near future. Chuba Hubbard also has not played well in the passing game, though, and we focus on the receiving portion of that because that's what matters most for fantasy. But Hubbard has also rated very poorly as a pass blocker, according to Pro Football Focus. So those two things combine to make him vulnerable to lose that type of work to Rico Dowdle, Trevor Etienne. Jared, what are we doing with these Panthers running backs?
I'm looking at the preseason usage from Carolina's first game, and Rico Dowdle actually outsnapped Chuba Hubbard 7-6 with Bryce Young. Rico Dowdle ran 4 routes to Chuba Hubbard's 3. Hubbard ended that game with 3 carries and 1 target. Dowdle had 2 carries and 0 targets. I'm definitely not expecting a 50-50 split between these guys once we get to the regular season. But as you said, Matt, it does make sense for Hubbard to cede some of that passing down work to Rico Dowdle. Chuba Hubbard last year, 36th among 37 qualifying running backs in both yards per route and PFF receiving grade. Was not good as a pass blocker either. And we even heard Dave Canales talk up Rico Dowdle's ability in the passing game recently. So I think what we saw in the preseason opener is not what we're going to get in the regular season, but I am buying Hubbard losing some of that pass catching work, and that kind of leaves him as a lower end RB2 at this point in our rankings.
I honestly don't like Hubbard where he's going. I'm passing on him either for another position or other running backs in his range. I know that he has been better than I ever want to give him credit for as a runner, but the specific risk of losing the receiving work, which he probably should, and where the team looks like it targeted receiving type of backs, I think that is potentially quite damaging. And then if he loses a lot of that work and then, is any amount of not the same as a runner, or the offense is just average at best, I'm not scared of missing out on big upside by passing on my concerns for Hubbard here.
Yeah, this is just one to me where like the metrics from last year, the coach speak, and the preseason usage all kind of line up and are telling us that, Hubbard is not going to be a 3-down back this year.
It is almost the middle of August as we speak. That means that your drafts are almost here. Some have probably already happened. If you like the content that you've been finding here throughout the offseason, then you can find much more and go much deeper on draftsharks.com. And it is time to get your league synced ahead of your draft. That's going to give you a customized draft war room with rankings and recommendations specific to your format. You can run as many mock drafts as you want with your specific league settings and draft position right there on our website ahead of the real thing. You can try out different strategies. You can get feedback on your roster at the end of the draft. Get ready for the real thing. Your league mates will not know what hit them. That is if you make Draft Sharks your unfair advantage.